What I have for you tonight is some of the bird photographs I've taken over the last year. And I'm going to start with the Arctic Tern photos I took this year. I have hundreds of these that I get each year, and this year I had some pretty special ones. When the terns return in the spring, it's not too long before the female will find a rock like this that's close to the nesting island, and she'll sit there, and occasionally the male will fly in and join her, and they'll display. And one of the days I was out, I found this one close to one of the islands that they nest on, and I let my canoe drift in against the shore of the island and sat and waited. And I didn't have to wait too long before the mate came in with an offering of a fish for it. I found that this happening twice with the two birds that were nesting close by, and in both cases, the female actually spit the fish out and didn't eat it. I'm not sure if that was because it was a sucker. This shows one of the nests on the further island that's halfway down the lake. And there's a single egg right here that the female settled in and started to incubate while I was watching. But the other interesting thing was that there were two other eggs up behind them. I wasn't able to confirm that this pair had actually produced young, but I'm fairly certain that they did. The last sighting I had of them just before they left was 10 terns. And so there were 6 adults, 3 nests, and that means there should have been 4 young. And up to that, I'd only accounted for 2 of the young. So I think these 2 eggs actually hatched out. The terns are very aggressive defenders of the nests, and one of the nests was predated by a bald eagle. I think what happened was a pelican approached the nest too close, and it distracted the adults from the nest, and the eagle came in. An interesting thing was they reestablished the nest about 4 days later, but then it was predated for a second time by a raven this time, and the nest was not reestablished. This is one of the young that out of the nest. I confirmed that there were 2 young. It's being fed by the male. So it appears to me that the male does most of the feeding, and the female will kind of guard the young, stay close by. Okay. The other bird that was kind of interesting this year that I got good close look at was the American kestrel. And they chose to use one of the wood duck nesting boxes that I put up close to neighbor's cabin. I was able to sit on the porch and watch what was going on. And here's the female bringing a dragonfly into one of the chicks just a few days before they fledged. I actually ended up being quite discouraged by the kestrels. Early in the season when they started to feed, they really did a number on my songbird population in the area. The chickadees and particularly the swallows. We had 3 nest boxes with swallows in them, and none of them were successful at fledging their young because the adults, I'm certain, were taken by the kestrel or chased away. This is one of the young just after it had fledged. It was the day that it fledged. There was interest. They were very awkward in trying to perch. And then a couple of days later, I found them sitting in an aspen tree in front of the house. It was a little bit too far for the camera, but I was able to see them well with the spotting scope, and I mounted the camera onto the scope and got some interesting video. was much happier to see that the adults were now feeding mainly dragonflies and insects. By now, the dragonflies, there were plenty of dragonflies. Here it is with maybe a wood boring beetle. I think these pelicans we had a little bit higher water this year, and the lake actually flooded into some grassy areas. And I found it interesting when I was looking in these where the grass was, the water is just full of the tadpoles. And the pelicans spent a fair bit of time in this little patch of grass in front of Peter Culbert's house, and I'm quite certain they were feeding on the tadpoles. And I find it interesting some of the pictures you can get of the pelicans and how they can display for you. I was out paddling one day and I could hear the sandhill cranes calling, and I paddled over and was able to get fairly close to them. And I was actually hoping that I could catch them on video doing their calling, because they've been really loud and it was echoing quite nicely. But these guys didn't do any calling for me while I was videoing. And then is it one head is better than two, or two bodies are better than one head? The great blue heron usually spends its time down at the creek where there's some beaver dams that are a little bit better habitat for it. But this year it spent a couple of times coming up into the recreation site bay and along the beach, and got a few really nice pictures of the heron. I don't get to see very many pictures of the grouse now that I have a bird hunting dog. But this one was down by Tatlico, and the lighting was really nice. I have a hummingbird feeder, and it attracts mainly the rufous hummingbird. The male takes over and he doesn't let anybody else come around very much. And again, was able to get some fairly good pictures. These two were displaying quite nicely as they were trying to drive each other away from the feeder. Once the rufous hummingbirds departed, we've been attracting some Annas out here now as they spread their territory. And this, I had a couple of the Annas this year, and one of the interesting things that this picture shows is that the one way to tell them apart from the calliope is that the tail on the Annas is longer than the wings, whereas with the calliope, the wings are longer than the tail. A little bit of an increase in the amount of waterfall this year. I think they were making use of that flooding into the grass. It's always interesting in the spring to watch the courtship of with the Barrows goldknot. Males fighting each other over the female. We usually get 3 or 4 families. I think there was one female this year that was carting around 24 young, and I don't think they could have all have been hers, but it was quite a sight to see that many young. This a blue-winged teal was nesting on the lake, and was using that little grassland that the pelicans were feeding in front of Peter's. We always have a lot of Canada geese on the lake. I've had as many as 70 of them in the nesting season. This isn't a really good quality picture. It was one of the last pictures I took with my old lens. That started to fail. It wouldn't focus properly, but it shows a cackling goose with two Canadas. And this cackling goose stayed around for 3 or 4 weeks, and I would always see it with flying or swimming with two Canada geese. You can see it's about half the size. The neck is shorter. It's got a rounder head. So you can get a really good comparison with the cackling goose. Having seen this, I actually was able to find a couple of others. I found one on Piper Lake and another one on Martin Lake this spring. The mallards always nest on the lake. The mallard this year was in some wolf brush along the shore, and Nayut would find it just about every day, but not the nest, fortunately, but the female would drag him out into the lake where he would swim around and until he got tired. The pintail will also nest. I think they're similar to the mallards. They'll find a place to nest off into the trees. I've never flushed them off the nest, so I expect they're well back from the shore. But I usually find some young later on in the summer. A pair of shovelers also had a nest in that same grassland that the blue-winged teal used. And they actually were together quite often. The families actually were together quite often. I believe this would be one of the young ones after it was late in the fall, and there were several of them together along with the blue-winged teal. One of my trips back from checking on the terns, I found the juvenile five-billed grebe, and it was they won't nest here, but it would be in migration. This is a new bird for me at Eagle Lake this year. It's a female red-breasted merganser. One of the characteristics, a couple of characteristics that are different from the common is it has a very large bill compared with the common. The hair is a bit scraggly compared with the common, but the neck markings are quite different. The common merganser has a very distinct line between the light and the dark, and it also cuts off that the dark doesn't extend down into the breast. I had 2 or 3 of them around for quite a long time, but by now the lighting was not good. The sun was getting lower in the sky, and I really had struggled to get a decent photograph. I always love these guys with their wonderful bills, and I was fortunate to get close enough to get one in flight this year. It's been one of my challenges that I've been working on is getting pictures of the birds when they're in flight. This is not from Eagle Lake. This is from down in Tatlico, and it's a yellow-billed loon. For the last 4 years, I found them down there 2 winters, and this was in the winter of 2021. I didn't get close to them at all. They were a long, long ways away every time I went down, but just about every time I went down, I would see a couple of them. And the most I saw was 3. The neck is different from a juvenile common loon. And of course, they do have a bright bill. The back is very strongly marked compared with the common loon. But one of the main things I found with them that helped me identify them was the position of the bill. The yellow-billed loon will hold the bill like this one is, with it pointed slightly upwards. And if it's consistently holding it that way and it has the light bill, then you're looking at the yellow-billed loon. The common loon, the juvenile, does have a lighter bill, and a light like this, you would have trouble telling whether it was a common or a yellow bill just from the brightness of the loon, or lightness of the bill. Got a nice collection of gulls on the lake, and of course this one with the pink legs and the orange spot on the bill is a herring gull. A nice row of California gulls with the spot on the bill that's got orange and black on it. The Bonaparte gulls always nested on the lake. In fact, way back when we were building the cabin, the Canning brothers were helping us, and they spent a lot of their time looking at the Bonaparte gull colony that they found on one of the islands. They like to nest on mature spruce trees using the lower branches. But unfortunately, all the islands that have mature spruce trees on them are now no longer islands because of the loss of water in the lake. I don't know where they're nesting on the lake now, but they've gone further down on the lake, further to the east. A juvenile Bonaparte. It's interesting, they have a black tip on the tail, and the adult, it's missing on the adult bird. And this is a new gull. It's one of the smaller gulls. The bill is a shorter, all yellow, greenish yellow bill. And now adult Sabine's gull. Quite often in the migration, I'll get a juvenile, and this year was the adult that I got. I find the way they feed to be kind of interesting. They stir up the mud and get the insects, whatever insects are in there. We usually see lots of shorebirds, not quite as many this year, but a nice collection. This is a Baird's sandpiper that I'll see in both migrations. The greater yellowlegs, I'm sure they nest somewhere around, but I think they use some of the little pothole ponds that are close by the lake. We always have the killdeer nest in here. Another one we'll find during the migration is the lesser sandpiper. It's the smallest of the sandpipers. Has a drooping bill, and the greenish yellow legs are an indicator that you've got the least sandpiper. That's normally an Arctic breeding bird, the semi-palmated plover. It's in the killdeer family, and they always nest on the lake, and it's a relatively rare nesting site for them. They use other lakes in the area. I found the nest at Martin Lake, and they also nest on Piper Lake. Phil was actually looking at them out on Beecher's Prairie this year, and was hoping that he was going to find the nest, but I don't think he was successful. It's a juvenile, probably from one of the nests this year. We always have some spotted sandpipers. And I've always struggled to try and find nests, and I've been only successful twice. And both times it was because the female incubating had flushed as I got a little bit too close to where the nest was. This was under some brush and very, very well hidden. The other one was actually under a great big flat rock right close to the beach. Nest was in sand. So these are the eggs. And a couple of days later, and then a few more days after that. Not sure how many of them survived, but I think I saw 2 here. Western sandpiper, very similar in size to the least sandpiper, but you can see it has dark legs. And it has this patch of brown on the shoulder that distinguishes it as well. The black-cat chickadee actually was nesting in this stump that's in the hole that's in the stump right behind the picture. It's only about a foot off the ground. Right beside the trail that goes down to the lake. One of my walks over to check on the easternmost tern nest, Merlin was telling me I could hear a boreal chickadee, and Merlin kept telling me I was hearing a boreal chickadee around the house, but that was not the case. But so I thought, well, it's just another blackcap, and I started looking around for the blackcap, and lo and behold, there was the boreal. I think it actually had a family. There was 4 or 5 of them in the area. It's kind of neat to see that they're still around. I had them on my feeder for 3 or 4 winters. It would come to the feeder every day. Then we have the Canada jay. Then there was a Steller's jay around this year. One of the neighbors actually saw a blue jay, but it didn't come around my house, at least not that I saw. One of my neighbors has this lovely bird bath, and she had a family of waxwings that were nesting close by, and every day they would come down and have a drink while she was sitting on the deck. So I sat in one of her chairs and waited for her to come down and for a picture. I have lots of these around right now. They're on my feeder and taking all my seed. There's a fox sparrow. You can see it's got a little bit of a reddish on the tail and unmarked head, about the same size as a song sparrow. And this is a Harris's sparrow. It's one of our rarer sparrows, and about the same time Phil C.C. Birds was distributing pictures of the Harris's sparrow. One showed up in my yard. Very pretty LBJ. There's another one that fascinates me. If anybody was asked, well, what's that bird? All you'd have to do is look at it. You can call it a great crown rosy finch. They actually nest in the mountains out here. I've up on Perkins Peak on one of the hikes up there. I saw several of them, and they were busy feeding young. They like to nest on cliffs in the alpine. This is another one that will nest in the alpine close by, the orange crown sparrow. And this is one of the juvenile, and it was around for quite a long time this fall. the northern water thrush was another bird that Merlin kept telling me it could hear, and I could never find it and I could never hear it. But I found this one right close to the beaver dam that's on the creek just as it flows into Eagle Lake. Not very often you get to see the orange crown warbler and actually see the orange crown. Usually he hides it away. And I found the pine siskin to be a real challenge. I've been trying to get it with its wing spread, because it really has very, very beautiful, colorful wings and tails. So finally, I got this one, and I'm going to keep looking because I'm hoping for get the tail fanned as well. Didn't have a lot of Vesper sparrows this year. This is one I love to hear sing. They're usually out in the on the shoreline, on the shore of the lake in the grasses, and they'll nest there. And they're always singing, and I'd always be able to hear them sing. But I only saw them a couple of times all spring. Another one that Merlin kept hearing for me, the white-throated sparrow, and it finally showed up. And I've only seen a couple of these at Eagle Lake. Another one that's easy to name when you see it flying away from you. If you have a number of woodpeckers around it, the northern flicker has been using a cavity in an aspen tree that's right in front of the deck. So has some great views of them feeding the young at that cavity. Had a few birds of prey. I was up in the patch of fir trees up on the height of land between Eagle Lake and Highway 20, and the great horned owl was barking at me. It's something I've heard them do before, so I knew I wasn't too far away from either the nest or a nestling, and Nayud actually found it for me, but he was very, very careful and didn't get close to it at all. He had great respect for that bill and also the claws that it's got. It was very well protected. It was tucked right up against a stump. It had fallen out. It had come out of the nest. It was and it was pre-flight. This winter, I heard reports of owls at ranch that's at Lunch Lake. So I've taken a number of drives down there, and one day I found the owl sitting on an aspen right close to the road. Got some really good pictures of it. One of the things these birds of prey will do is they'll lighten the load before they take flight. And I've seen this with osprey and eagles quite often. I don't think he had eaten too much because there was no lightning this time, but I was pretty certain he was going to take off. And sure enough, he did. And really lucky that he flew towards me and let me get some really nice, sharp pictures of it. And it landed actually closer to me on a fence post. I was hoping it was going to plunge into the snow and grab a mouse for me. Had a really interesting experience back in October. I had a chance to go down to the bird banding station in Calico and assist Sashay, the bird bander, with an evening of banding northern saw-whet owls. So I wanted to share a little bit about that experience. It was a really fascinating night. We started just at dark, about 7 o'clock. And we went through till 11. And we banded 16 birds. The birds are caught in a mist net. The nets are laid out in a rectangle with a recording device inside of the rectangle that's constantly playing the saw-whet owl call. And then it attracts the owls into the nets. And every 20 minutes, we walk through the nets and extract the owls and bring them back to the banding station and put the bands on them. The program was extended this year. That's why Sashi needed some help. The CRD provided funding to extend the program. The other interesting thing that happened with the saw-whet owl program this year was 9 saw-whet owls were equipped with a Modus transmitter and antenna. I didn't get to see them by the time I got there. They had all 9 of the transmitters had been installed on owls. They're attached to the bird with much like a backpack. They have fine wires attached to the antenna that have loops in them that go over the wings, and the antenna sits on the back of the bird. Each antenna transmits a unique signal, so whenever the signal is received by a Modus tower, they will know exactly where the bird was tagged and can actually trace the migration of the bird. They also installed a receiver in the valley up on the east side of the Patago Valley. And so we're looking forward to being able to see if some of these come back, and also, of course, tracking any other birds that have transmitters on them. The trips to pick the owls up are really fascinating. I very distinctly remember one trip in where all around the net where we had trapped four owls, but all around there were owls that were calling. There had to be at least another 4 or 5 owls right in the same area. In fact, one of them was sitting on a branch right close to the nets, and Sashi tried to catch it in its hand. The banding station is really worth having a visit, and if you're ever out in the valley during the banding season that starts in 1st of August and goes till the end of September every year. They usually band it from daylight till usually around 11 o'clock when the number of birds they're catching starts to drop off. The banders, main banders, Avery and Sashi, are very welcome. They're very knowledgeable birders, and they do a wonderful job of explaining what they're doing, explaining the data that they collect. The data is really significant. They collect in a very consistent manner, and they're looking at the weights of each bird, the lengths of the wings, the health of the bird, the fat content on it, and of course, as well as the species. And so they can follow population changes. They try to age the birds, so they'll be able to compare the number of young with the number of adults, and if that changes from one year to another, or if there's changes with climate that might match with it. Really fascinating opportunity for studies to occur. So they have a little shed that they use to band the birds in, and they bring the birds back in the cloth sacks that you can see one of the banders holding. And it's really is worth a visit. Didn't see many red-tailed hawks this year. In fact, didn't see very many hawks at all. Usually there's northern harrier that are around the lake and the red-tail as well. But this one was actually across the road from the wreck site. I expected it had a nest because it was it was calling at me and giving me a bit. Usually I'll see immature goshawks, but this year I got a good look and got quite close to an adult. I wish it had flown towards me. A little bit further away, but it's a good picture of the merlin, and thank goodness it's feeding on a dragonfly instead of one of my chickadees. I actually saw one today for the first day. It flew by the house while I was having breakfast. A few weeks ago, when I came back from my walk with the Nayut in the morning, all of my chickadees were way up in the top of the aspen trees. There must have been 15 or so of them up in the top of the tree. They're never up there. They're always sitting around in the spruce trees down closer and lower, closer to the feeder. And when I kind of looked around there, I found the northern shrike sitting up there, and they were making sure they knew exactly where the shrike was. And as soon as it flew away, all the chickadees were back on the feeder again. And of course, it wouldn't be Eagle Lake if we didn't have a few eagles. The eagles have a favorite perch that's right along close to the shore where I walk every morning, and I've got thousands of pictures of bald eagles sitting up on the top of this exact same snag. And usually if I'm patient and wait long enough, they'll fly away for me and let me get some really spectacular flight pictures. So Eagle Lake, and I think that's a great place for me to call it quits for tonight. I hope you've enjoyed the show, and we'll share some more sometime, I'm sure. Maybe before I go, just a little word on the terns. They are very, as I mentioned, they are very susceptible to predation and disturbed quite easily. And there are other times of the year, as you can see from some of this photo and some of the others, that you can get really, really close to them and they don't bother at all with you. And if you do decide to come out and you want to see some terns, it's really best to avoid the time from pretty well the end of June through to the middle of July. And certainly not to go out into the islands in the recreation site bay where they're nesting. If you are interested in coming out, don't hesitate to get a hold of me, and I can give you some details on where they are and where best to see them without disturbing them.